Welcome. You're listening to The Aligned Self, Conversations in Creating a Conscious and Abundant Life. This is Daniel Denovi. I'll be your guide and host. Let's see just where we can take this. Well, Daniel, welcome back to the conversation. If you've been following me or been listening on a regular basis and you're up to speed on when these are being released, you've noticed that there's been a slight gap between here and there. Actually, beginning since the 1st of December, there have been fewer episodes. And I'm going to explain why that has happened and just give you a good rationale or reason what was occurring and what is currently occurring. But first, I want to talk about the power of self-talk. So a couple weeks ago, my son's car finally puked. It went kapooey. It stopped dead in the tracks. We took it to the garage, and we found out that this 2005 Toyota, 17 years old, over 350,000 miles, required a new wiring harness, which seems simple enough. But when the garage began checking around, they said there's no wiring harness available for that particular car in that particular year on the planet. And I'm like, on the planet? And he said, on the planet. Now, we could create something, piece things together, but frankly, the labor involved is going to be worth more than the car is worth. So with that said, we decided to walk away from it. Well, he's at the tail end of an internship, so he needed a ride back and forth because frankly, he needed to complete this so he can get a paying job. Well, he's been working for a national network, television network, and I don't feel comfortable telling who it is at this point, but he's in video production and directing and camera work and all things video and audio. And that's where his wheelhouse is. Well, they were gearing up for an off-site shoot, and it was something new, some new experience, and he's sitting in the passenger seat. And on the way to work, he says to himself, "Today is going to be a great day." And I smiled to myself because I know the power of self-talk, of projecting out into the future, of creating an outcome for your day or the next segment or the next section of your day. And I added, it's not only is it going to be a great day, it's going to be a phenomenal day. I wonder just how fantastic, how wonderful today is going to turn out. Aren't you curious? And he smiled back at me and said, yeah. Now, I did that. I added to it to ramp up the energy, ramp up the vibration behind his utterance, behind his declaration for the day. Because it's not just the words we say, it's the energy behind the words. And those things that we speak to ourselves, when we forecast how we want to be in the world, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It is self-hypnotic. You see, everything that you say to yourself, all these utterances that you murmur under your breath, are heard and taken in by your other-than-conscious mind. It accepts these things as truisms. And frankly, what he said was declarative in the nature that there was no evidence that today was going to be a great day, only him in choosing that it was going to be a great day. And this, my friends, is the law of attraction in action. Now, most of us take an assessment of how we see things at the moment and interpolate how it's going to go, rather than create fresh from this moment. Your point of power is the present. It's this present moment, because what you're currently experiencing is just a summation of past decisions, past ideas, past actions. We're living in the past when we address the moment, like right now, because the next moment is created from what we're thinking, how we're being right this moment, right now. It sets the stage for what will occur next. But when we just, take a look at how things have been showing up and we take the past and move it into the future, we're just creating more of the same. So this self-talk, these declarations, these affirmations of what we want in our drawing into our lives to manifest the next hour, the next day, the next week, the next year, the next 5 years. Although when we project that far out in the future, there's a lot of latitude for us to create something more amazing. Now, for a moment, I want to draw attention to one of the things I did hypnotically when I was talking or adding on to my son's declaration. When I said, I wonder just how amazing, how fantastic today is going to be. Aren't you curious? The hypnotic phenomena underneath that statement is that I wonder how amazing, how fantastic. It presupposes that it's going to be fantastic. It's just a matter of degree. Now, this goes back to a couple podcasts ago when I talked about the power of questions. When we engage with the question how, we engage a process. We engage like a strategy, a set of criteria. And in this instance, when I asked him how amazing, how fantastic will it be, the mind goes out on a quest. It begins searching his experience for all the ways, all the criteria that defines a phenomenal or fantastic day. In fact, if it doesn't fit that criteria, if it's like less than amazing, it gets put aside because it doesn't answer the question. So this is how we focus our mind. We attenuate our attention. And as you're listening to the sound of my voice, listening to this podcast, I wonder how many different ways can you engage this idea in your life? How can you put this to action? How can you put this, the feet on the pavement and really bring it to life in your life? And as you do so, I wonder how deeply in love you'll fall with your own life as you begin to develop a deeper appreciation of the power of the things you say to yourself. Now, for me personally, when I had this little interchange with my boy, I realized for myself that I was not being responsible for some of the things that I was saying to myself, some of the things that I was uttering in confidence in the interior of my mind. And when people would say, how are you doing? What are you up to? I would say, oh my God, I'm so busy. I have so much going on right now. That does not feel, light and airy. And I promise I'm going to address a lot of the details of this whole process for me in its own separate podcast. What started occurring the 1st of December is I started to become overwhelmed with the amount of work, the amount of projects that I had on my plate. And I basically twisted myself into a whole set of circumstances, what I call negative manifestation. And frankly, I thought I would be able to talk about this in detail much earlier than now. But what's interesting is that no thought ever leaves you where it found you. Adversity always carries with it the seed of a greater equivalent, according to Napoleon Hill. And frankly, over the years, I found that statement to be so true. Yet, a few podcasts ago, I mentioned, that I had been through a process of negative manifestation. Manifesting things that I didn't particularly like or didn't particularly want. And the period since, the end of November has been very uncomfortable for me. More uncomfortable than probably years. And if I'm truthful, I have to admit that thought form, that arena that I was playing in helped usher in COVID. And I want to say thank you for those of you that have sent emails and inquiries as to how I was faring with the COVID, with the Omicron variant. Well, the answer is fantastic, better than fantastic, and I'm getting better all the time. But had you asked me 3 weeks ago, my answer might not have been so cheery. But I've had a come to Jesus moment. Whenever, things aren't working out, and I don't know if you're the same, I don't like it. I don't like the way it occurs, and I realize that I'm standing here creating my own reality. I'm manifesting this. I'm the one responsible for the way life is showing up. It just doesn't happen to me. It has never happened to me. I've always been the one guiding and attracting circumstances into my life, for better or worse. And so there I was, looking at, experiencing what I had created. And frankly, I did not like it. So rather than focus on the way things were, the past, I started asking the question, what needs to shift in order for me to step into the next level, to increase my vibration, to take more responsibility for my energy? Now, before I go forward with this, I want to point out that I'm an expert. So I'm supposed to know. I'm not supposed to, go off course, end up in the weeds or go into the ditch. But there I was, and I kept driving for the ditch. I wasn't stopping myself. So no matter where you are on the path, I just want to say, we're always doing the best we can with what we have at the moment, the resources we have available. So on the journey of personal growth, personal development, we never ever get it done. You never reach a point where, you can say, I'm finished. You're always a work of art in progress. So for me, the exciting part of going through the quote-unquote negative manifestation is coming to a point where I'm actually more engaged, more passionate about the podcast, about my life, about my coaching practice, about every aspect of my life. But I didn't realize that I had lost the eye of the tiger, that focus, that passion. I hadn't realized I had grown stale. Now, I say that with a little caveat because my worst days are typically better than 90% of the people's best days, because I have made it a practice to raise the baseline of my normal day-to-day, the baseline of my normal. So I exist in a higher degree of joy, happiness, satisfaction than the majority of people. But even so, it's all relative, it's all personal. So for me, some of the edge, some of the polish had been taken off my efforts. So as a result of that conversation with my son, I realized for myself, something that I used to do early on, is when someone would ask me, how are you doing? How are things? I wouldn't say, oh my God, I'm so busy, or I have so much to do. You'd never guess what's on my plate. I would say, fantastic, but don't worry, I'm getting better all the time. Super good, don't worry, I'm getting better. None of this, well, as good as can be expected. None of this, well, how am I? Well, not too bad, not too bad. Been worse. That's not inspiring. I would say fantastic, but don't worry, I'm getting better. So no matter how I felt at the moment, I started out at fantastic. And when you start out fantastic, when you start out at great or super good, and then leave the door open for something more amazing, more fantastic to show up, you're operating in a whole new level of engagement with life. So try this. Right now, pause the podcast and say to yourself, I feel fantastic, but I'm getting better all the time. Ever expanding, more and more, always more fantastic, more amazing. Life is showing up in the most amazing way. And say it with meaning. Say it congruently as if it is fantastic. It is as if it is amazing. And just me saying it now, I'm vibrating on a whole new level right here inside this podcast. So pause it and see how it feels for yourself. Okay, so did you pause it? Did you try it did you actually experience it for yourself, or are you cheating yourself out of an experience? If you didn't do it the first time, go ahead and pause it now and try it for yourself. Say, I feel amazing. I feel great, as if you really, really mean it. So if you didn't do it the first time, hopefully you did it the second time. If you haven't yet done it, why are you cheating yourself out of the experience of life, really experiencing a shift in how you're being? Well, if you haven't done it the first 2 times, I'm not going to cajole you anymore. Do it after the podcast. Do it in the serenity or the privacy of your car or in your bedroom, in the bathroom, in the shower, but do it. Okay, now, I want to give you a preview of some of the things that are coming up now because of some of the revelations that I've gone through for myself. And that's becoming reacquainted with the power of setting outcomes, having an outcome orientation, not just for the day or for your life, but, for the hour or for a segment of your day. I'm going to be talking about the power of goal setting and setting intentions, how to set a clear intention and how to set it to be in alignment with source, to be in alignment with what is most important to you. You see, a lot of people set goals, but they're not necessarily aligned with these intentions that they're throwing out there. And so they set up self-sabotage, and we're going to be addressing that. And while in the podcast, I'll give you the framework for how to do it on your own, I'll actually be creating a training for those participants, those members in the vault to have access firsthand. And looking at every aspect of your life, every area of your life, and how to create outcomes and intentions that raise the bar, that guide you towards the journey of touching the sky. And then once you start touching the sky, how do you create intentions and outcomes that are even more expansive, bigger than that? That is where I'm at. And this podcast marks my declaration that things are ever expanding from here, from me. And you hanging out with me, you're going to experience or be part of the ride. Now, I want to touch upon a couple things that happened to me over the last month or so. I had two podcast listeners, reach out to me and ask for a coaching session. With the caveat is I can't afford your normal rate. Now, just a one-time session, a strategic session with me is $2,500. And I realize that's out of the reach of some people. Yet other people over the years have plunked down that like it was nothing, like it was chump change. So I realize it's all relative to where you are at life and what you're creating and what your problems are, what your challenges are. So these two individuals were entrepreneurs just starting out, and they wanted some coaching. So I offered them access to me for a dirt cheap rate. And I want to say dirt cheap because it's what I charged 20 years ago. And frankly, I'm not going to advertise this far and wide. It's primarily just for the podcast listeners because you've developed a relationship with me. And if you want some coaching, if you desire some coaching around a specific area, and I've coached around relationships, I coach around business, health. Over the years, I've coached around every aspect of life because the fundamentals of coaching, the fundamentals of processing, because the fundamentals of utilizing your mind to get the result you want is pretty straightforward. We just typically change the context or we change the situation, but the dynamics are applicable across the board. Just recently, I had a guy ask me to hear out an idea. He wanted me to take it apart. And so he asked me what would be my rate for 30 minutes. I said, let's start out at $800. He kind of blinked at first, and then I said, if after 30 minutes you don't feel, the information or the questions, the result that you get at the end of 30 minutes is worth your money, just let me know and I'll give you your check back. He said, okay. So he was sitting right at the edge of a $25,000 business deal. And I asked him 3 questions, 2 of which he could answer, the third he could not. And this took all of 5 minutes. So I said, why don't you call your guy and ask him that third question? And his guy that he was ready to invest $25,000 in could not answer the question, did not have proof of concept. And he ended that conversation with his guy withdrawing his interest and investment from the project. And he turned to me and said, thank you. That was the best $800 I ever spent. It just saved me $25,000. I had another client that engaged in a 6-month agreement with me to address something that they've been in therapy about for 8 years and hadn't seen any results. They wanted to see what I could do. Well, within 3 sessions, the issue that they had been trying to address in therapy was no longer present. It had disappeared. And we were supposed to do 4 sessions a month for 6 months. So what are you going to do with the rest of your time? We actually started inventing stuff to work on. So again, I'm not going to say how much I'm charging. You can go to the link, go to yesdaniel.com, click on strategic coaching, and find out what your investment would be. And you can chat with me whatever you want to work on, and I'll tell you, yes, I can address that, or no, that's out of my wheelhouse. I've not yet found much that stands outside my wheelhouse. I don't do therapy, I do re-education. I re-educate your mind on how to process information, how to assimilate information, how to cull together and express your resources. And like I said earlier about creating well-formed outcomes, I'm very outcome-oriented. So there's none of this airy-fairy, abstract results. You know on the front end the result that you want to achieve, and we're both working for the same result. So it's very easy to get results quickly when you know the target that you're aiming for. So if you think you want to work on something, you can ask me and I'll tell you yes or no. I'll be completely upfront. And it may be, just maybe, one of those things that it requires several sessions to address. But typically, I don't work more than 6 times on the same thing. And oh, yes, just like I gave my guy who gave me the $800 for 30 minutes, at the end of this call, if you don't feel you got your money's worth, just say, I didn't get my money's worth, and I'll return your investment. Now, a lot of you may know that I am psychic. I'm very intuitive. I bring my intuitive gifts to my coaching. But if you want me to start out on the intuitive side and start out with a reading first, and that I do that in intuitive coaching, it's the same price. All you have to do is specify, I want a woo-woo reading. And like I said in the very first episode of The Aligned Self, I bring a mix of the practical, the scientific, and the metaphysical side to it. I exist in both the etheric world and the physical world, and I bring the two together. Now, before I sign off here, I just want to address those of you that are members of The Vault, my membership program with the access to multiple courses. Good news is I'm back on track. I've already added items to The Vault, and more are coming soon. In fact, the end of March is going to be a full NLP practitioner course. And those of you that are not members of The Vault or even members of The Vault that want to upgrade your money game, I currently have an 8-week coaching program that is beginning on February 22nd, 2/22/22. And if that interests you, you can go to yesdaniel.com and click on Upgrade Your Money Game. Well, my friend, I want to thank you for your listening. I want to thank you for your presence, not only in the listening to this podcast, but your presence on the planet, for the difference that you make not only for yourself, but for the people around you. And I absolutely love it when you take information that is revealed in these conversations and tell me how you put it to practice in your life, how it's impacted your life, impacted your relationships with your loved ones. Because when you share, it just throws another log on my inner fire to make a difference for you. So until next time, this is your friend and host, Daniel Denovi, urging you to follow your bliss and by all means, engage in the epic adventure.